Hi, I'm Melissa Wright. I'd like to apologize if I sound funny. I'm getting sick this week, so I have a sore throat and I think I'm getting a cold. Copyright has really influenced the art world. From its inception, when it was initially to provide a brief period of exclusivity to encourage innovation, to now it's changed dramatically. The period that copyright applies is now far longer than it was originally, and that's actually stifled creativity. It's kept people from being able to create derivative works for much longer because older creations still haven't entered the public domain. We're still with the same set of art and creations in the public domain as we had a very long time ago. There was also, in the 1900s, there was also the advent of the idea of intellectual property, which ownership of expanded copyright from just designs for objects to ideas themselves. The problem with this is that in a lot of cases where innovation is happening, someone else is coming up with that same idea somewhere totally different in the world and independently of this one person that's trying to claim it as theirs. People tend to arrive at the same ideas at around the same time, independently of each other, and that causes a problem for intellectual property. You can't say that the idea only belongs to this one person when this other person independently arrived at that same idea. So, with this advent of intellectual property, derivative works have been demonized. Things like fan fiction, fan art, or anything that's inspired by or takes the themes and ideas of something else, sometimes even titles from something already existing, can be hit with a lawsuit for copyright infringement. There are some fair use clauses and ways in which this can be circumvented, but it can also be really hard to prove that something is fair use when it kind of comes down to interpretation. That's caused a lot of problems for fanwork communities in the past, and there were actually a lot of authors and various creators that were suing people for copyright infringement, be, even though they weren't profiting from their work, they weren't trying to say the work was theirs. They were just exploring their creativity and expanding their skills as a writer or artist and showing their love for the original work as well and sharing that with the other people that were reading or viewing this content that they were creating. In the early days of the internet, when fan work communities were springing up, they were very secretive because there was a real threat that they could get sued for creating this work. They could get in a lot of trouble, and that led to a lot of different disclaimers on fan work that it wasn't for money, that they didn't own the characters, that the characters, events, setting, etc. belonged to the original creator of the work that this was derived from. And that's kind of stuck around, and a lot of people that are in those circles don't necessarily realize that now a lot of people are more okay with fan fiction and there's much less of a threat of being sued by somebody. Nowadays, there's also more artists that are specifically making their work Creative Commons so that they are public domain now and people can use any part of them in any way they wish. And that's great. That adds to the public domain and it gives more people more places that they can build their work off of and draw inspiration from without fearing negative consequences from having derivative work. The other thing is most work is derivative in some way. I've gotten inspiration from so many different sources and built off of different existing things, and so has everything else. My art builds off of existing art, that art builds off of existing art, and it just keeps going. Like, there's not a starting place. All work is derivative in some way. That's that's a large part of why there is the phrase steal like an artist, because artists steal, and they steal the ideas, they sometimes steal the phrases, and they rework them into something new and something that's their own. Their spin on it is what makes it new. But my ownership of my creations does not extend to derivative work. I own my poetry collection, but if my poetry collection inspires other people's poetry, or found poetry, or anything of that nature, as long as someone said, I took these words, or I got this idea from this, and pointed back to the work it came from, I don't have a problem with it. Someone else can use it, though I would call it more proper if they pointed back to what I created and said this is where they got their idea from, or this is what they drew from to create what they did. Because then they're not claiming my work as theirs in sort of a vague way. Really hard to say what the future of copyright will look like. People's minds are changing on derivative work, on fan art, on fan fiction, on copyright in general, and that's fine. That's kind of what happens. Copyright has expanded from its original intention, so maybe it'll either go back to that or we'll go back to not having copyright at all. Regardless of what happens, I will still be creating. I'll always welcome any kind of derivative work with open arms, and I've created derivative work myself. So with that, thank you for watching and have a great day.